I can make 1,000,001 story times about my life. This one by far is the juiciest. I've thieved, I've lied, I've had no friends, I've had no dad. This one is the best. Or the worst, it's the juiciest. So I was badly bullied through primary and secondary school. And by badly, I mean my school attendance was literally about 10%. And also I know for a fact this person's going to watch this. Maybe this is a little disclaimer to not bully someone because it comes back to haunt you. As I said, I was badly bullied, but as well as the bullies, you have the observers. The ones that are friends with the bullies, film what they're doing and laugh with them. They don't necessarily bully you. In my opinion, they're worse. Because at least the bully has the balls to do it. You're just sat there filming it. Anyway, moving on. I'm not sure how much to say. I'm not sure what to give away. So there was this one group of friends. There were 3 of them. Sometimes 4, but that person kept falling out with them. And this group was brutal. When I was eating, they would chuck food at me and tell me to stop eating. When I sat down in class, they would sit next to me. They'd like follow me around the school, shouting things at me. They'd make sure to get behind me in line so they could shout stuff behind me. They were probably the most tedious, brutal group. There was quite a few groups that bullied me. So anyway, there was one girl in this group that didn't actually bully me, but she was an observer. So she would film it and post it and laugh with them as they were chucking food at me. Anyway, the peak of this was in about year 9, year 10. So quite a while ago now. And obviously when I left school, I lost all contact. I lost contact during school because I just unfollowed them all. However, some of them follow me. That's so cringe. No, but seriously, some of them follow me. Like, ask me to promote their business. That's not the story. But this one girl, the observer, she, re-entered my life. This is where I don't know what to say. You can put 2 and 2 together. We're friends here. She re-entered my life because of my brother. Yeah. So my brother is 2 years and 2 school years above me. So you can kind of figure out why she re-entered my life because of my brother. And when I tell you this next part, it's what? I don't get how people's brains work like this. So she was telling my brother how much she regretted it. How she doesn't speak to the people in that group. Which is a lie because she actually does and she's friends with them. Both of them. That's lie number 1. I feel like I'd make a whole part series about this girl. However, if you regretted it so much, if you regretted bullying someone or being the observer, you would go back through them videos and delete them, wouldn't you? Because who wants a year ago in their Snapchat memories popping up about you laughing and bullying this kid? Quite literally a kid, 13 years old. Anyway, you would delete the videos, right? No, she didn't. Even though she quote unquote regretted it so much. My brother and her were just chilling and she just shows him the video of me. Of all of them, it was in a changing room and they were laughing at. They were saying horrible stuff and literally, I swear to God, I was crying in the corner and she was just filming it. As soon as he told me about this situation, I know the exact video she showed. She was laughing. She said something like, ha, look what I found. You're showing that to my brother who saw me go through all of this. And that's what I mean by this story is ridiculous. I can obviously confidently say she's not in my life anymore. And that's not even all she did. However, that is how my high school bully actually re-entered my life. 2023 didn't really go off to the start we wanted. Being serious though, please don't bully anyone. I laugh about this whole situation and what happened to me before. However, it really did mess me up mentally and it's just not a kind thing to do. If you're in a friendship group of people that bully people, leave. Be the bigger person because you're just as bad. My life is full of drama.
Here's the story time about how 50 Cent stayed at my house. This was back when Indianapolis was hosting the Super Bowl, so I'm not sure what year that was. But I will never forget, I was really young, so I didn't really know who he was, but I remember my dad being like, honey, it's a secret, but 50 Cent is staying at our house. I was like, okay, great. If it's not Tori Vega, then I don't care. To find out a couple years later, he rented out our house for the Super Bowl, and then Floyd Mayweather rented the house next door. So they did it together. Obviously, as I've gotten older, I understand this more, but at the time I didn't. I was just like, okay, cool. But we had to leave the house. I vividly remember driving to Muncie, Indiana, staying in a hotel while they were there until the Super Bowl was over. And I remember I woke up so early because my dad said if I woke up early, you could go meet Floyd and 50 Cent. I don't know if just the times didn't match up, but I never ended up meeting either of them, but my dad did, and I have a picture and I will find it to show you. This is one of those examples of a really good fun fact. There's obviously way more to the story, so let me know if you want a part 2.
Story time on how I found out one of my ex-boyfriends was cheating on me during our whole entire relationship, and I have screenshots. So a few weeks into the relationship, everything was going fine, and after a few weeks I get a call on the same day that my dad passed away from this girl. I'm still friends with this girl, right? And she basically told me that her and the mates and obviously the ex-boyfriend and a few of his mates were out drinking, right? I don't know why I wasn't invited to this, what? But yeah, anyway, she told me that this girl was apparently kissing the ex-boyfriend, hugging him, dancing on him, twerking on him, and I was like, what the flip? So obviously I'm already in a state because my dad passed away literally that same day, and then I've just been told that my boyfriend's cheated on me. So I message his mum and I tell her about it. So as you can see, I message his mum saying, hiya, I don't really know what to do in this situation, but I've just been told that has been kissing another girl called and hugging her from behind, and she was dancing on him and twerking on him and stuff, and I don't really know what to do as he've been like this before. She said, I'll ring him now. I've just been told by Bleep's girlfriend, but she told me not to say anything yet. Wait, don't ring him yet because Bleep will start on Bleep. And then she put, I can't read that. I'm going to ring him or something, don't worry. I can't really see the bottom because the record thing. And then the next day, he's out with his friends, and I receive this message off him that says, Sky, right, listen to me. I don't want you to get upset or anything because it's nothing about you or anything, but I just don't feel the same, and I haven't for a couple of days. I've had a good time with you, don't get me wrong, but I reckon we're best off as friends. I'm pretty sure this was the next day. If not, it was like a week after or something like that. And literally the night before, he was saying like all these things to me, and I was like, what the hell? And then he eventually just says to me, like a few minutes after that what he just messaged me saying, my mate's got my phone. I didn't mean any of that, I didn't say that, which now that I think about it, it literally was him. No, I am pretty sure that screenshot was the next day, because a week after, I'm out with my cousin because I'm off to go find the ex-boyfriend, because he wasn't answering my calls and I wanted to go and see him, obviously, as I do. So me and my cousin was out and was trying to find him, and as we're walking down the street, we see his best mate, and we walked past each other because we actually didn't clock each other. Like, I didn't know it was him, he didn't know it was me. We both turn around at the same time, and he's like, oh, hi Sky, and I'm like, oh, hi. And then we end up having a conversation, and then he's like, right, I have to tell you something, but you literally cannot say anything. I was like, okay, I'm scared. And automatically it came to my head, I was like, is it like the ex-boyfriend? And I was like, for God's sake, what has he done now? And he made me promise him I won't tell him, but I did, because obviously, why wouldn't I? So it was like, he's cheated on you. I don't remember what the story was, but I just got told that he was cheating on me with the same girl that the other girl told me about the first time. So it was just all kind of making sense. So now I'm literally fuming. I storm off. I'm calling his phone. I'm spam calling him, right? And he's still not answering me. So I get like 3 minutes down the road, right? And he finally answers my calls. When he answers, I'm like, where the fuck are you? Have you been cheating on me? And shit like that. And then he's just like, no. And then he's like, oh, where are you? Just come meet me then. And I'm like, okay. And then he was like, oh, I'm at this place. Because I asked him where he was, obviously. He was like, oh, I'm at this place. And then he's like, no, I'm not at this place anymore. Like 2 minutes later, he's like, no, I'm not at this place anymore. I'm at this place. And I'm like, all right then. So eventually, that call ends, and we're still trying to find him because he was not where he said that he was. Like all his mates were there, but he wasn't there. And then eventually, me and my cousin do actually end up finding him. And then I'm like, so have you done it? Have you done it? And he's like, who told you? Who told you? And obviously I didn't want to tell him because like his mate like told me not to tell him that it was him who told me. And eventually I'm just like, it was, and then I'm telling him, and then we start walking, right? Because for some reason I forgave him and I didn't believe his best mate, which I honestly should have done. Because he said, oh, he's just jealous because him and his girlfriend broke up and we're still together. I was like, okay, fair enough. Bear in mind, I've never really spoke to his best mate that much before, so I didn't really know who he was. But yeah, I believed him, and we started walking, right? And he was just walking about like 2 meters in front of me and my cousin, like not really speaking to me. And we get like 5 minutes down the road, right? And then he's like, oh, I think I'm going to get my mum to pick me up. And I'm like, mate, what the fuck? I've literally seen you for like 10 minutes and now you already want to go home. I was like, all right then, go home then. So he calls his mum. He actually doesn't say, oh, I won't then. He calls his mum, and his mum comes and picks him up, right? And after he gets in the car, she messages me asking if I'm okay and all that. No, she asks the ex-boyfriend if I'm okay. And he's like, no, she's been told that I've cheated on her. And then she messages me this. She says, meet in Aldi car park. I put, why, what's up? She put, just meet me there. I put, okay. She put, thank you. I put, it's okay, where's your car? She put, by the front. And then blah, 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 I'm just trying to find a car. So basically, me and my cousin get there, and then she's like, he would never do that. And then she says the same thing as what the ex-boyfriend told me, that his best mate was probably just jealous because him and his ex broke up, whatever. And I'm like, okay, because coming from his mum, it's just like a bit more like reassuring, I guess, rather than coming from the boy. And I'm like, right, okay then. So we just forget about the situation and we just carry on. And then one day when I'm out with him and a couple of his friends, the ex-boyfriend actually ends up going home because it was too cold or whatever. And then I'm out with one of his friends. I've never really spoke to this boy before, but, you know, I just stayed out with him because I didn't want to go in yet. And we end up going to the shops, and we see a few people there that we know. So obviously we end up speaking to him and things like that. And then this boy that I've known since year 7 came up to me and said, oh, Thingy was cheating on you at this place with this girl. And it was the same girl as the other times. And I'm like, oh my God, what the flip, are you being serious? And he was like, yeah. And bear in mind, it was his sister, right? It was his sister. So I was like, what the hell? Right, so now I'm thinking this has to be true because, like, it's like he just snitched on his own sister. Like, who would do that? I don't know. But he told me as well, like, I'm not even close with him either way. And then eventually, after like half an hour, I end up going home. And then I ring the ex-boyfriend, and he's like, no, I didn't do it. And then he tries to turn it on me and saying that, like, oh, why would you even say that? You make me feel like shit for you accusing me of all this stuff, even though he knows full well that he did do it. And then he starts having a go at me, and halfway through of him having a go at me, my mum walks in my room, and I'm like, shh. And then she listens to him. I start bawling my eyes out because I hear when people have a go at me. And plus, I didn't even do anything wrong. I just asked him if he cheated on me, and then he just started basically switching the situation on me as if I was the bad one, even though it was him. I have a screenshot somewhere for this, but I can't be bothered to find him. But basically, he was just saying, I left him unopened, and he just said that basically that I put no effort into the relationship, even though I got the bus for like 2 or 3 weeks straight to his house every single day to go and see him. He said that I was putting in no effort, and then we just had an argument, and then basically we just ended up breaking up. And then he messages me on Instagram saying this: I got with you because I was bored, mate, so I don't even make out. I wanted you for real. You got cheated on the whole time we was together. You were just a side piece, bro. Yeah, I know I did, doesn't bother me. It really didn't. Yeah, so F off and get out my business then, you effing mong. I put laughing faces. He then puts, I'll drop all your windows, you little skank. He still hasn't done it. And then I put, yeah, do it then, come on. I know these people are going to see this because they do actually both follow me, and he has actually added me on Snap numerous times since we broke up, but I obviously haven't accepted it. Nothing against these two people though, like, you know what, fair enough. It was literally like the end of 2023 anyway, so who cares? Bye, guys.
Okay, guys, story time where my ex threatened me with a gun. We were together, but we weren't together. And you know, when you're in that phase, you still care, like I did. I got back together about, when was this? A little bit before Thanksgiving. Who wouldn't want to get back with their ex? I mean, he was fine stuff. Let's be real. But I also look better than him. I built him. Like, I gave him high ego, baby, high. He started taking me on dates or whatever, and I'm falling for it, y'all. The promise ring stage. First, mind you, why didn't I get a promise ring the first time? I'm happy about it, but at the same time, I'm like, why didn't I get one when we were dating in the beginning? Why am I getting one second go round? Like, do I look like a second go round type of girl? Hold on, I look a little tan. Y'all, I also don't get no sun. So cute. It was like heart shaped, and it looked like a Pandora ring until I found out it wasn't real. He told me it was from Pandora, and then I look up the actual Pandora heart ring, and it looked nothing like it. Y'all, this story's gonna be all over the place because I'm trying to think W stage, so I'm like really happy about my ring. Like, I would literally take a picture and post it on my spam every single day like this. Okay, before I get into like the actual cheating and how I got a gun held to my head. Okay, basically before I get to that part about how I got cheated on and got a gun held to my head, I'm gonna give you like a little backstory. Friends don't like your man. Listen. It's like so like sweet to me. Like, I'm not seeing past like loving him a lot. I would try to record a TikTok or like, you know, like you want to record a TikTok with your man or anything. He would like hide his face. And I'm like, okay. And I'm thinking like, okay, maybe he just doesn't want to be in the TikTok right now. Be for real. That girl gut feeling, that's a bad boy. It was bad. Like, I would be with him and I would just feel like something's up. His location would turn off and it would come back on like just out of nowhere. But like, why is it off in the first place? And like the first 2 times he blamed it on updating his phone. Do I look stupid? But why are you updating your phone twice in 1 month? And go, I wanted to sit down first and then go get our snacks, but I was like, okay, we could just hurry up and get them and then go in the movie theater. So, hey, the total is probably like $19. This dude started patting his pants, like, you know how like when a boy go to reach in his pants, get his wallet, and nothing came out. And so he started kind of like low-key patting his pants, and I'm just like, I have my head in my phone, but I'm like, This was like my last straw because I like to eat and I'm embarrassed on top of wanting to eat. Elena called me. She's very clingy. Okay, where was I? Oh, see the movie, and we're already late to the movie. Don't have any money. So I'm like, okay, guess I gotta pay. Like, it's just not giving. Like, you're supposed to go to the movies, your man's supposed to pay, sit down, you're supposed to be a princess, watch the movie, eat your food. But no, it wasn't like that. If he didn't know who SpongeBob was, he wouldn't be able to tell me what color he was in the movie. He never picked his head up out of that phone. Then he kept going to the bathroom. I've never seen somebody go to the bathroom in the middle of a movie so much in my life. He went to the bathroom 3 times, but he like chopped it up. I'm gonna come back and watch our stuff, then you can go. What? His phone and the little black thing that pulls out. And it's like, it's face down. First of all, why that phone not faced up? It's so close. So I'm like, if that thing just ring, I'm picking it up. You got your phone down since when? Like, why'd you put it down? That phone. Sorry guys, my brother. I pick up the phone and I like look at it. And like, he has his messages to where it shows like, it says, are you gonna come see me when you leave? Y'all, this is the bad part. I rode there with him. So I couldn't just get up and leave. Okay, y'all, at this point, I don't even want to be at the movies. Boiling at this point. I'm going off. I'm like, why? Like, who is this?
Get ready with me while I talk about my juiciest dating story time. Yes. I was gonna wait until I hit 10,000 followers, but I just said, you know what, I'm gonna bite the bullet and just make this video now and post it because I think there's a good few people waiting. I've got a few messages and comments like that. When is it coming out? Dying to hear the story time. So I'm gonna do that now. So on the little clip, kind of like almost a teaser of what actually the story time is gonna be about, I just said that me and this guy, we went from going on dates to the hope of being in a relationship at the end, and then we went to being just friends, and then we went to friends with benefits. Well, not really. It'll all make sense at the end anyway. So we go on a few dates, and I actually think he's a really nice guy, to be honest with you. Now, obviously there's some red flags that I ignore, as I do most of the time, which is not great. But he did seem nice, like, overall. we did lots of different things. Like, we went on about 5 dates, I'd say. And, like, he paid for everything, to be fair. And, like, we just got on really well, all that kind of jazz. One of the red flags, which is a big red flag, I probably should have stopped talking to him ever after he said this. Basically, he said, he said his friend got this, like, weight loss surgery, you know, that, like, gastric band, whatever it's called. I don't know. I was like, oh, right, yeah. He was like, you should get that. Like, to me, I was like, what? Like, why would you say that? Like, I don't know. I don't think that was nice at all. Like, fair enough to people to get that done, but, like, to imply that, like, I should get it done, like, he shouldn't have it saying that at all. Like, do you know what I'm saying? Like, what the fuck? Like, that is just a really weird. And, like, obviously weight is, like, a touchy subject for me, for anyone, I guess, really. Like, but, like, I'm on lots of medications and stuff, so it is really hard for me to, like, stay a healthy weight. So not put on weight. I'm trying my best now, but, like, it is really hard. As for the 5 dates, we stopped kind of talking, just for a reason I don't really want to get into, to be honest with you. But then we decided to go to the cinema, and that was all well and fine. He said he just wanted to be friends, and I was like, I don't really think I can be your friend. Like, we were, like, you know, going on dates and stuff, and it was obviously more romantic vibes, but, like, I was like, what, you want to just be friends? So I was, like, thinking, no, I don't want to be just your friend, like. But then he kind of kept texting me, like, over a space of time, maybe a week or so, and I was like, you know what, I'll just be his friend. I don't know why. Maybe because I still liked him, I don't know, but I just said I'd be his friend. And for a while, it was kind of weird going from being, like, seeing each other romantically to being friends, because, like, we were literally gone from, like, you know, kissing, whatever, and then, you know, like, talking to each other about the, like, I was telling him about the guys I was texting, he was telling me about the girls he was texting. Like, it was kind of weird when I think back. I'm not going to lie. And this isn't recent, by the way, so that's all I'm going to say. I'm not going to say the timeline, but it's not recent at all. So basically, there was this one night he wanted to go on a night out, like, as friends, obviously, and he said he'd invite his friend along. I was like, okay, that's fine. It was a bit weird. I was meant to bring a friend as well, but my friend cancelled, so it was only the 3 of us, and it was a guy as well. But yeah, it was kind of a strange night, not going to lie to you. So the friend clearly liked me, like, fancied me, or thought I was hot, or whatever you want to say. But, like, I don't think the other guy that I was seeing before, I don't think, I know he didn't tell him that we were seeing each other before that. So it was so weird, like. And he obviously didn't tell him, the guy I was seeing, that we had been seeing each other beforehand. So I was like, oh, he's our friend, like, I think she's cute, whatever, I'm gonna go for it. And I honestly didn't really like his friend that much. Oh, that sounds bad, but I didn't really like him. Like, he did kiss me. I found the whole situation weird as it was, but I told him, no, I have to go home or whatever. So that was fine. But I just thought it was so weird. And the guy I was seeing before, like, almost, like, encouraged this behaviour, which is so weird, like, seeing as we were, like, seeing each other beforehand. It was really strange. So yeah, so after that night out, I just thought it was a bit weird, and I never, like, texted. I didn't even get, like, his number or, like, Instagram, whatever, the guy, his friend. Like, I just didn't, I wasn't interested, to be honest. And just keep in mind, the guy I was seeing before was texting me, like, a lot, like, on normal, I think it was a live message or something, it doesn't really matter, but, like, he was texting me a lot, like actually every second of every day, like, you know what I mean. And I was like, is this what friends do? Not really. I don't really text my friends. I do obviously text my friends. I don't text them that often, but I didn't really think anything of it. I knew we were just friends now, and I was accepting that. So then, out of the blue, he says, do you want to be friends with benefits? I was like, what? I literally thought we were just friends. And he was like, I was heading in that direction anyways. And I was like, was it though? Like, I was kind of like confused. But I did kind of like still like him kind of. So I was like, I don't know. So I did end up going to his house, which is obviously a bad idea, but you know, stupid Jessica being stupid Jessica. But nothing actually happened. Let me tell you what actually happened. So I went over to his house, and obviously it was clear what he wanted. The windows from his room were getting taken out, like, and new windows are getting replaced basically. So like he literally, we had to go into like a sitting room kind of thing, a small sitting room. And yeah, I was like, there's no way I'm doing anything in here. No way in hell. To make matters worse, he literally lived with his family. Nothing wrong with that, like, but like, I'm saying, like, don't have me over and like try to have me, you know, sneakily in the house. Like, what the hell are you actually doing? Like, in the sitting room as well. Like, no. He was on a work, like, he was actually working from home, so he literally got a work call, an important work call, may I add, when we were kind of mid-kissing. He was like, oh, I have to take this. I was like, what? And then I had to like crawl to the side and hide so they wouldn't know I was there, and like try not to breathe too heavily so they wouldn't know there was someone in the background. Is that just so funny? After all that, I just wanted to go home, and I was like, what the fuck is actually going on? Like, it was clear that he was just using me for one thing. So, you know, when I said, like, maybe it was the same day, I don't remember, sorry, my light turned off, or was it the next day? I just said, please don't ever talk to me again, and he didn't. So that's the end of my story time, lol. There's probably a lot I'm leaving out, to be honest, because I don't fully remember. It wasn't recent, like. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this dating story time, and feel free to give me a follow as well if you want more content like this. But yeah, bye guys, and that's the finished makeup look as well.
Someone at the barbecue asked my boyfriend who he'd date if not me. He pointed at my best friend and said, Brittany, obviously. Obviously? I stood there holding the potato salad I'd made while my boyfriend Jason and my best friend Brittany both laughed like he'd said something hilarious. We were at our friend Tom's annual summer barbecue with about 30 people, and Jason had just announced to everyone playing the stupid drinking game that he'd pick my best friend if I didn't exist. Come on, babe, it's just a hypothetical question. Jason took another swig of his beer while Brittany tucked her hair behind her ear, the way she always did when she was pleased about something. Besides, Brittany and I have so much in common. It makes sense. No offense, babe, but she doesn't nag about video games or get stressed about work stuff. Brittany giggled and touched his arm. Stop it, you're making me blush. She was loving this attention in front of everyone. But yeah, we do vibe really well. Remember that concert last month? The concert I couldn't attend because I was working overtime to afford Jason's birthday present. You two went to a concert together? I asked, and several people looked surprised. Jason rolled his eyes. You were busy like always. Brittany stepped up. That's what friends do. We should tell her about the other thing, Brittany said, then covered her mouth like she'd revealed a secret. What other thing? I set down the potato salad because my hands were shaking. Jason waved his hand dismissive. Brittany's been helping me apartment hunt. You know, for when we move in together. We'd never discussed moving in together. We're moving in together? Jason laughed. Not we. Me and my future roommates. Brittany found this sick 3-bedroom near her place. Near her place. My best friend was helping my boyfriend find an apartment near her without telling me. When were you planning to mention this? Brittany jumped in defensive. He needs his space. You're always suffocating him with your need to know everything. She said this in front of everyone like it was common knowledge. That's rich coming from someone who texts him more than I do. The words came out before I could stop them. Jason's friend Alex laughed. Oh shit, she knows about the texts. Everyone turned to look at Alex, who immediately looked guilty. I'd seen Jason's phone light up with her messages at midnight, at 1 a.m., at 3 a.m. "We're friends." "Friends text," Brittany said, but her face was red. "Besides, you work nights, so someone needs to keep him company." Tom's girlfriend, Lisa, pulled me aside. "Hey, maybe we should go inside for a bit." But I wasn't moving. "No, I want to hear more about how my boyfriend and best friend would be perfect together." Jason stood up, annoyed. "See, this is why I said Brittany. She doesn't make everything a drama." He walked over to the cooler for another beer. "You're exhausting sometimes. Brittany's just easier." Brittany nodded, supportive. "You do tend to overthink things. Like when you got upset about me borrowing your dress without asking." The dress she'd worn to Jason's cousin's wedding that I wasn't invited to, because they only had one extra spot. "You went to his cousin's wedding?" People were really uncomfortable now, but Jason and Brittany seemed oblivious. "You were working." Again, someone had to be my plus one. Jason said like this was reasonable. "Brittany looked amazing in that dress, by the way. Better than when you wore it to your work thing." He actually compared how we looked in the same dress. Brittany smiled, proud. "It fit me perfectly. We're basically the same size, except I'm a little more toned." She said this while flexing her arm. "That's from all our gym sessions." Tom interrupted. "You guys go to the gym together?" Jason nodded. "Every morning at 6. This one never wants to wake up that early." He pointed at me. "But Brittany's dedicated. She spots me in everything." I worked until 7 a.m. most mornings, which they both knew. "So, while I'm saving lives at the hospital, you two are working out together?" Brittany laughed. "Saving lives? You're a nurse, not a doctor. You basically just follow orders. My best friend since middle school just dismissed my entire career. At least I have a career. You're still living off your parents at 26. Brittany's face went dark. "My parents support my art. Not everyone has to slave away at a depressing job." She moved closer to Jason, protective. "Jason understands my creative spirit. He's actually been modeling for my paintings." This was news to everyone. "You've been modeling for her?" I asked Jason, who shrugged. "She needed a subject, and I have a good body." He lifted his shirt to show his abs, which was weird and awkward. "Bro, you're 5'8". Models are like 6'2" minimum." Jason got defensive. "Height doesn't matter for certain types of modeling. Brittany's been taking photos for my portfolio." He pulled out his phone to show everyone. "Look at these shots she took." The photos were Jason, shirtless in various poses in what was clearly Brittany's bedroom. "These were taken in your room, Brittany." Lisa said what everyone was thinking. Brittany got defensive. "So? The lighting is better there? It's not weird?" She grabbed Jason's phone to show more. "This one's my favorite. Very intimate and vulnerable." It was Jason on her bed looking at the camera with what he probably thought was a sexy expression. "Why is he on your bed?" I asked, and the entire barbecue was watching now. Brittany started saying something about natural light and artistic composition, but I was already walking away from the group gathered around the patio table. My legs felt weird and disconnected, like they belonged to someone else, but they kept moving toward the side gate that led to the front of Tom's house. Behind me, I heard someone say my name, but the voices all blended together into noise I couldn't separate into actual words. The gate latch stuck for a second, and I had to pull it twice before it opened, and then I was on the front lawn walking faster toward where I'd parked my car on the street. Footsteps came up behind me quick, and then Alyssa was there touching my arm gently, trying to get me to stop or at least slow down. She asked if I was okay, and her face looked really worried. But when I opened my mouth to answer, nothing came out except a weird choking sound that wasn't quite crying. She asked again if I wanted her to come with me, or if I needed to sit down for a minute, but I just shook my head and pulled my keys out of my purse. My hands were shaking so bad it took 3 tries to unlock my car door, and Alyssa stood there watching me with this helpless expression, like she wanted to do something but didn't know what. I finally got the door open and climbed in, and she stepped back onto the curb as I started the engine. Through the windshield, I could see her mouth moving, saying something else. But I was already pulling away from the curb and driving down Tom's street away from the barbecue, and all those people who'd just watched my boyfriend and best friend humiliate me. I made it 2 blocks before my hands started shaking. So hard I had to pull over into a parking lot next to a closed dry cleaner. My whole body was shaking, actually, and my breathing came out in these short gasps that made my chest hurt. I sat there gripping the steering wheel, trying to make myself calm down enough to drive safely, but every time I closed my eyes, I saw Jason's face when he said Brittany was easier than me. After maybe 10 minutes, I started driving again, but 3 blocks later, the shaking got worse, and I had to pull into a gas station and park near the air pump. A guy pumping gas at the next pump over glanced at me, and I turned my face away and pretended to look at my phone until he left. When I finally made it to my apartment complex, I sat in my assigned parking space with the engine off, just staring at the steering wheel. The clock on my dashboard said it was only 7:30, which meant I'd been at the barbecue for less than 2 hours, even though it felt like days had passed since I walked in carrying that stupid potato salad. My phone buzzed in my purse, but I didn't check it. Dawn from the apartment next to mine walked past carrying grocery bags and stopped when she saw me sitting in my car. She came over and tapped on my window, asking through the glass if everything was all right. I nodded and gave her what I hoped looked like a normal smile and waved to show I was fine. She looked uncertain but nodded back and continued toward the building entrance. I waited until she disappeared inside before I got out of my car and walked to my apartment on the second floor. Inside my apartment, I dropped my purse on the floor by the door and went straight to my bedroom without turning on any lights. I grabbed my phone and sat on my bed with my back against the headboard and opened my text messages. There were already 3 new messages from people at the barbecue, but I ignored those and scrolled back through my conversation history with Jason, going back weeks and then months. Every message I'd sent him asking what he was doing or if he wanted to come over suddenly looked different, now that I knew he was probably with Brittany when he said he was busy or tired or hanging with the guys. I opened my photos and started scrolling through, looking at every picture from the past 6 months. There was the concert Brittany and Jason went to without me, and I remembered that night exactly because I'd worked a double shift that ran until 3 in the morning. Jason had texted me around midnight saying he was bored and going to bed early, and I'd felt guilty for not being available. I pulled up my work schedule app and checked the date, and sure enough, I'd covered an extra shift that night because Jason had been short on rent money and asked if I could help him out. He'd promised to pay me back but never did, and I'd just let it go because that's what you do for people you love, supposedly. I switched to my email and searched for receipts from the past few months. The gaming setup I bought Jason for his birthday cost $847, which I'd saved up by working 3 weeks of overtime shifts on top of my regular schedule. The receipt was dated June 15th, and his birthday was June 20th, so I'd planned ahead to make sure it arrived on time. I scrolled through more emails and found confirmation for the concert tickets that Brittany and Jason used, even though I was the one who originally bought them before I realized I had to work that night. I'd told Jason to sell them or give them away, but apparently he gave them to Brittany instead. There were receipts for dinners I'd paid for and movies I'd bought tickets to, and the new phone case Jason wanted because his old one was cracked. I added up the numbers in my head and stopped counting when I got past $1,500, because seeing the total made me feel sick. None of the receipts showed Jason paying me back or contributing anything, and I realized I couldn't remember the last time he'd paid for something when we went out together. My phone lit up with a new text, and I saw Jason's name on the screen. The message asked why I made such a scene and embarrassed him in front of everyone. A second message came through right after saying I was being dramatic about a harmless game question and that I needed to chill out. A third message appeared saying Brittany was upset because I'd made things weird by overreacting to innocent photos. I stared at the messages feeling like I was reading words in a foreign language that didn't make any sense. He was acting like I was the problem for being upset that he'd publicly announced he'd rather date my best friend and then showed everyone intimate photos taken in her bedroom. My hands weren't shaking anymore, but my whole body felt cold and numb, like I was watching everything happen to someone else. I didn't respond to any of Jason's messages and instead put my phone face down on my nightstand. The apartment was completely quiet except for the sound of my neighbor's TV through the wall playing some game show with canned laughter. I sat there on my bed in the dark for a long time before I finally picked up my phone again and called the hospital. My supervisor answered on the third ring, and I told her I needed to call in sick for my shift tomorrow night. My voice came out scratchy and weird, and she asked if I was okay because in 2 years of working there, I'd never called in sick once. I said I thought I was coming down with something and just needed a day to rest. She told me to take care of myself and not to worry about the shift because they'd find coverage. After I hung up, I felt relief mixed with shame because I'd just lied to my supervisor who trusted me, and now someone else would have to cover my shift. But the thought of going to work and pretending everything was normal while my brain kept replaying Jason saying Brittany was easier made my stomach hurt. I set my phone down again and pulled my knees up to my chest and sat there in the dark, listening to the game show laughter from next door. When I woke up the next morning still wearing yesterday's clothes, my phone screen showed 17 new text messages. I rubbed my eyes and started reading through them one by one. Tom had sent 2 messages apologizing for what happened and saying he had no idea things would go that way. Alyssa sent 3 messages asking if I was okay, and if I wanted to talk. 2 people from the barbecue, whose names I barely remembered, sent short messages asking if I was all right. Then there were the other messages from people saying I'd overreacted and made everyone uncomfortable by causing drama. Someone named Jared, who I'd met maybe twice, said it was just a game and I took it too seriously. Another person said Jason was probably drunk and didn't mean anything by it. The worst one was from Kellen, who wrote a whole paragraph defending Jason, saying it was just guy talk and that I was being too sensitive and couldn't take a joke. He said everyone was talking about how I stormed off and made a scene over a hypothetical question that didn't mean anything. I read his message 3 times, feeling my face get hot, because Kellen had been at every hangout for the past year, and I'd considered him a friend. My phone buzzed with a new message while I was still staring at Kellen's text. This one was from Brittany, and it was long enough that I had to scroll to read the whole thing. She wrote that I was ruining her friendship with Jason over nothing, and that I'd always been jealous of her even back in middle school. She said the modeling photos were for her art portfolio, and I was making it weird by sexualizing her work, when it was just about capturing the human form. She wrote that Jason had been telling her for months how stressed and controlling I'd become, and how I never wanted to have fun anymore. She said she'd tried to be supportive of our relationship, but I was clearly too insecure to handle Jason having female friends. The message ended with her saying she hoped I'd get therapy or something, because my behavior at the barbecue was embarrassing for everyone. I read the whole message twice and then put my phone down on my bed and walked to the bathroom. My reflection in the mirror looked terrible with smudged mascara and my hair sticking up weird on one side. I splashed cold water on my face and tried to remember when exactly Brittany had become someone who would send me a message like that. Back in my bedroom, I picked up my phone and started taking screenshots of everything. I screenshotted Jason's text from last night calling me dramatic. I screenshotted the timeline of the concert date matched up with my work schedule showing I'd covered his rent. I screenshotted the receipt for his birthday present. I screenshotted Brittany's long message about me being jealous and insecure. I screenshotted Kellen's message defending Jason. I went through my photo gallery and screenshotted pictures of Jason and me together from months ago, when things seemed normal compared to recent photos where I was always alone or just with coworkers. I saved everything to a folder on my phone not because I had any kind of plan, but because I needed to see it all organized in one place to prove to myself this was really happening. Looking at the evidence laid out like that made it impossible to pretend I was overreacting or being too sensitive. The pattern was clear when you put all the pieces together, showing how I'd been working overtime to support Jason financially, while he spent his free time with Brittany doing things he claimed he was too tired or busy to do with me. My phone rang around 2 in the afternoon and Cyrus's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but then figured he'd just keep calling until I picked up. His first words were asking what the hell happened because Mom had called him saying something was wrong and I wasn't answering her messages. I hadn't even noticed Mom had texted me. I started explaining about the barbecue and Jason's answer to the game question, but my voice kept breaking and I had to stop and start over. Cyrus stayed quiet while I told him everything, including the concert and the apartment hunting and the modeling photos in Brittany's bedroom. When I finished, he was silent for a long moment, and then he said he was going to go over to Jason's place right now and make him regret being born. I told him not to do that even though part of me wanted him to. He argued that Jason deserved to get his ass kicked for treating me like that in front of everyone, but I said I needed to figure out what I wanted to do first, before anyone confronted Jason. Cyrus finally agreed, but said if I changed my mind, he was ready whenever I needed him. After we hung up, I felt slightly better, knowing at least someone was completely on my side without any questions or doubts about whether I'd overreacted. I spent most of Sunday going through every social media account blocking anyone connected to Jason or Brittany, because I needed them completely out of my life. My phone buzzed around 6 in the evening with a knock at my door that made my stomach drop. I looked through the peephole and saw Jason standing there holding a pizza box like he was just stopping by for a casual visit. He knocked again and called out asking if I was home because he could see my car in the parking lot. I opened the door just enough to block the entrance and asked what he wanted. He held up the pizza box with this confused smile like I should be happy to see him, and asked if I was done throwing my tantrum because we could go back to normal now and he was hungry, so what was for dinner? The pizza wasn't even the kind I liked. It was the meat lover's special he always ordered, even though I told him 100 times I didn't eat that much red meat. I told him we were done, and I wanted him to leave, which seemed to genuinely shock him based on how his face changed. He actually laughed and said I was overreacting to a stupid party game, and that Brittany was just his friend, and I was being controlling by having a problem with their friendship. He tried to push past me into the apartment, but I held the door firm and repeated that we were done, and he needed to leave. Jason set the pizza box down on the hallway floor and started listing all the reasons I was wrong about the situation. He said the concert was just 2 friends hanging out, and the apartment hunting was him trying to be independent, and the gym sessions were about fitness goals, and the modeling photos were about Brittany's art career. He made it sound like I was inventing problems that didn't exist, and that any reasonable person would understand his friendship with Brittany was completely normal. I asked him if he thought it was normal to tell 30 people at a party that he'd obviously date my best friend if I didn't exist. Jason rolled his eyes and said it was a hypothetical question in a drinking game, and I was making it into this huge thing when everyone else thought it was funny. He kept saying I would change my mind once I calmed down, and that I always got emotional about stuff and then felt stupid later. He reached out to hug me like that would fix everything, and I physically pushed his hands away from me. His whole expression changed from confused to angry in about 2 seconds. He called me crazy and said I was acting insane over nothing, and that this was exactly why he said Brittany was easier because she didn't make everything a federal case. He grabbed the pizza box off the floor and told me to call him when I was ready to apologize for being dramatic, and then he walked down the hallway toward the stairs. I closed the door and locked it and stood there shaking for probably 10 minutes. I called a locksmith first thing Monday morning even though Jason never had a key to my apartment because I didn't trust him not to somehow get one made. The locksmith asked if I was having security concerns, and I just said I recently ended a relationship and wanted to feel safe in my own space. He nodded like he'd heard that before and didn't ask any follow-up questions. The whole process took about 40 minutes and cost me $200 I didn't really have to spare, but it was worth it to know Jason couldn't just show up inside my apartment somehow. The landlord called me later that afternoon because apparently you're supposed to notify them before changing locks, and I explained the situation about ending a relationship and needing to feel secure. She was actually really sympathetic and said she understood completely and just needed a copy of the new key for emergencies, which I dropped off at the office that evening. I went back to work for my next shift on Tuesday night, and Whitney immediately noticed something was wrong when I walked into the break room. She asked if I was okay, and I gave her the basic story about the barbecue and Jason's answer and everything that came out about the concert and the apartment hunting and the modeling photos. Whitney listened without interrupting, and then told me about her own experience with a guy who made her feel crazy for noticing obvious red flags. She said he used to tell her she was too sensitive whenever she brought up concerns about his female coworker, and it turned out he'd been sleeping with the coworker for 6 months. Her story made me feel less alone in what I was going through, because she understood exactly how it felt to be gaslit about something you could clearly see happening. My phone kept buzzing throughout my shift with texts from Jason that alternated between apologizing and blaming me. During our break, Whitney asked to see the messages, and I showed her the 15 texts he'd sent since I got to work. One text said he was sorry for calling me crazy and that he loved me and wanted to work things out. The next text said I was being unfair and controlling and that I needed to grow up. Then another apology followed by another message saying Brittany was right about me being jealous and insecure. Whitney looked at the messages and said someone who respected my decision to break up wouldn't be harassing me like this. She convinced me to block his number right there in the break room, and I did it, even though part of me felt guilty about cutting off communication completely. Tom texted me Wednesday morning to apologize for the barbecue situation and said he had no idea Jason and Brittany were spending that much time together. He mentioned that several people at the party felt uncomfortable with how Jason answered that question, and that Lisa was really upset about the whole thing. Tom said he valued our friendship and didn't want me to feel like I couldn't come to future gatherings because of what happened. His message actually made me feel a little better, because at least some people recognized how messed up the situation was. Alyssa reached out Thursday asking if I wanted to get coffee, and when we met up on Friday afternoon, she told me she'd been noticing weird vibes between Jason and Brittany for months. She said she almost said something several times, but didn't want to start drama if she was wrong about what she was seeing. Alyssa described moments at group hangouts where Jason and Brittany would have inside jokes or touch each other's arms or disappear together for cigarette breaks even though neither of them smoked. She said there was this energy between them that felt off, but she couldn't quite put her finger on what was wrong until the barbecue made everything obvious. Through our conversation, Alyssa mentioned that Jason and Brittany had been hanging out at Tom's place together when I was at work, and that multiple people in our friend group noticed but nobody told me. She said there were at least 4 or 5 occasions over the past 2 months where they showed up together to Tom's house for game nights or movie watching, and acted like a couple even though they insisted they were just friends. The betrayal suddenly extended beyond just Jason and Brittany to all these people who watched it happen and said nothing. Alyssa apologized for not speaking up sooner, but I told her I understood why she didn't, because it's hard to know if you should get involved in other people's relationships. Still, it hurt knowing that so many people saw what was happening and let me stay in the dark. Tom called me Saturday morning sounding guilty and said he needed to tell me something. He explained that Jason had been telling people I was too focused on work and never wanted to have fun anymore, and basically painting himself as the victim in our relationship. Tom said that's why some mutual friends seemed to think I overreacted at the barbecue, because Jason had been setting up this narrative for weeks that I was the problem girlfriend who didn't appreciate him. Apparently, Jason complained constantly about how I worked too much and stressed about money and didn't want to do spontaneous things and made him feel bad for playing video games. Tom apologized for not recognizing it as manipulation at the time and said he felt terrible that he'd believed Jason's version of events without questioning it. I realized Tom was right about how Jason had set up this whole narrative where I was the bad guy who worked too much and didn't appreciate him. The manipulation had been happening for months while I was busy saving lives at the hospital, and he was busy painting himself as some kind of victim to everyone who would listen. I spent the next few days trying to process everything while avoiding my phone, because I knew more people from the barbecue would have opinions about what happened. On Wednesday morning, I woke up to a notification that Brittany had tagged me in an Instagram post. I opened it and saw photos of her and Jason on some hiking trail with mountains in the background. They were both smiling and sweaty in athletic gear, and one photo showed them sitting close together on a rock overlooking a valley. The caption read, "Real friends show up when it matters most," with a bunch of heart and hiking boot emojis. I checked the date stamp and realized the photos were from Monday, which was only 2 days after Jason had shown up at my apartment begging me to take him back. They had planned this hiking trip while he was still texting me about how much he missed me and wanted to work things out. I felt sick looking at those photos because it confirmed what I already suspected. Jason wasn't actually trying to get me back. He was just keeping me as an option while he figured out if things with Brittany would work. The hiking trip proved they were already acting like a couple even if they weren't calling it that yet. I took screenshots of everything, including the timestamps and captions, because some part of me needed evidence that I wasn't crazy for feeling betrayed. My mom showed up at my apartment Friday afternoon with 2 grocery bags full of food and a container of her homemade lasagna. She didn't ask about Jason or the breakup or anything that happened. She just started putting groceries away in my kitchen and told me she was staying for the weekend. I tried to tell her I was fine and she didn't need to babysit me, but she ignored me and kept organizing my refrigerator. She brought comfort food and fresh vegetables and ingredients for breakfast, and basically made sure I had real meals instead of whatever random stuff I'd been eating. Having her there helped more than I expected because she didn't push me to talk about my feelings or analyze what went wrong. She just made sure I ate proper food and had clean laundry and wasn't sitting alone in my apartment spiraling. Saturday morning, I was drinking coffee with my mom when she mentioned that she never really liked Jason. I asked her why she never said anything, and she told me it wasn't her place to criticize my relationship unless I asked for her opinion. But now that it was over, she wanted me to know that she thought Jason took advantage of my work schedule. She said he seemed like the type of guy who wanted a girlfriend when it was convenient, but complained when he actually had to consider someone else's needs. She pointed out that I was always working extra shifts to help him with rent, or buy him expensive presents, while he never seemed to appreciate any of it. She said I deserved someone who bragged about having a nurse girlfriend instead of complaining to mutual friends about how much I worked. Hearing my mom say these things made me realize how obvious the problems were to people outside the relationship. Jason had been showing everyone who he really was for months, but I was too busy trying to make things work to notice. My mom told me she was relieved I ended things because she was worried I would waste years trying to fix someone who didn't want to be better. She said the right person would be proud of my career and understand that saving lives was more important than being available for gym sessions at 6 in the morning. Sunday afternoon, after my mom left, I decided to go through my apartment and remove everything that reminded me of Jason. I started with the photos on my walls and nightstand and threw them all in a garbage bag. Then I found the birthday cards he'd given me and the stupid stuffed animal he won at a carnival and the t-shirt he left at my place that I used to sleep in. I pulled everything out of drawers and closets and off shelves until I had a pile of Jason-related items in my living room. The gaming setup I bought him for his birthday was still sitting in the corner because he never bothered to pick it up after the breakup. I texted Cyrus and asked if he could help me get rid of everything. Cyrus showed up an hour later with his truck, and we loaded everything into the back. He suggested we could have a dramatic bonfire or throw it all in a dumpster, but I told him I just wanted to donate most of it. We drove to a donation center and dropped off bags of clothes and the gaming equipment and anything else that was still usable. Cyrus kept making jokes about Jason's stuff going to someone who would actually appreciate it, and that made me feel a little better. Getting rid of everything was easier than I thought it would be. I expected to feel sad or nostalgic, but mostly I just felt lighter, like I was finally clearing out space in my life for something better. Tuesday evening, I was scrolling through Instagram when a message notification popped up from Jason. He'd found a way to contact me even though I had him blocked on everything else. The message said he wanted to meet up and talk things through properly. He wrote that he missed me, and that what he had with Brittany wasn't romantic. He claimed they were just compatible as friends in ways we weren't, and that I was misunderstanding their relationship. He said he realized he made mistakes at the barbecue and wanted a chance to explain everything in person. Part of me wanted to ignore the message completely, but another part of me wanted closure, and a chance to say everything I needed to say without him interrupting or deflecting. I agreed to meet him Wednesday afternoon at a coffee shop near my apartment. I picked a public place with lots of people because I didn't trust him not to make a scene if things got heated. I told Whitney about the meeting, and she made me promise to text her when it was over. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early and ordered a drink and sat at a table near the window where I could see the parking lot. Jason's car pulled in 30 minutes after our agreed meeting time, and I watched him check his hair in the rearview mirror before getting out. He walked into the coffee shop and spotted me and came over acting like showing up late wasn't a big deal. He sat down across from me and immediately started talking about how hard the breakup had been for him. He said he'd been really struggling with everything and that he missed having me in his life. He talked about how lonely he felt and how he didn't realize how much he relied on me until I was gone. He went on and on about his feelings and his experience and his difficulties, without once asking how I was doing or acknowledging that he was the one who caused all of this. I sat there drinking my coffee and letting him talk, because I wanted to see if he would eventually get to an actual apology or take any responsibility for what happened. Jason admitted that he and Brittany had been spending more time together lately, but he insisted it was only because I was always working. He said he needed companionship and someone to do things with, and Brittany was available when I wasn't. He actually had the nerve to suggest we could try our relationship again, if I was willing to cut back my hours at the hospital and be more available for him. He said relationships require compromise, and that maybe I had been prioritizing my career over us. He made it sound like the whole problem was my job, and my schedule, and my unwillingness to put him first. I told Jason that I work night shifts because I'm saving people's lives and supporting myself financially, and I'm not apologizing for having a career I care about. I said that plenty of people have relationships where both partners work demanding jobs, and they make it work because they respect each other's commitments. His response was that Brittany doesn't make him feel bad about playing video games all day, and that she understands his need for freedom and flexibility. Hearing him say that told me everything I needed to know about his priorities. He wanted a girlfriend who would be available whenever he wanted attention, but wouldn't expect him to contribute anything meaningful to the relationship. When I brought up the apartment hunting and the modeling photos in Brittany's bedroom, Jason got defensive. He said I was twisting innocent things into something bad and making everything seem worse than it actually was. He claimed the apartment hunting was just Brittany being helpful since she knew the area better, and the photos were just for her art portfolio. He said I was being paranoid and jealous, and that I couldn't accept that he had a close friendship with someone else. He got more and more annoyed as I kept pushing back on his explanations, until finally he stood up and said he couldn't talk to me when I was being unreasonable. He left the coffee shop without paying for his drink, and I sat there for another 20 minutes just processing how delusional he was about the whole situation. That evening I got a message from Brittany saying she heard I met with Jason, and that I needed to stop trying to come between them. She wrote that their connection was special and real, and that I was being a bad friend by not supporting her happiness. She claimed that Jason and I were never right for each other anyway, and that she could see that even when we were still together. She said I should be happy for them instead of causing drama and making everything difficult. The message was so ridiculous that I almost laughed because she actually believed she was the victim in this situation. I opened my phone and typed out one message to Brittany telling her that real friends don't go after their best friend's boyfriend, and that I wanted nothing more to do with her. I hit send and immediately blocked her number before she could respond with more excuses or fake concern. Then I went through Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, and every other app, blocking her on all of them so she couldn't reach me anymore. It felt good to cut that connection completely, instead of leaving any door open for her to keep inserting herself into my life. Whitney texted me the next day asking if I wanted to grab dinner with some of her friends from her apartment complex, and I almost said no out of habit. But then I realized I'd been turning down invitations like this for months, because Jason always wanted me available on my nights off. I told Whitney yes and showed up at this Thai place near her building, where she introduced me to 3 women who all worked different jobs and had their own lives going on. They were friendly and asked normal questions about my nursing work, and nobody knew anything about my drama with Jason and Brittany. We talked about a new show everyone was watching and someone's terrible date last week, and it felt so refreshing to just be a regular person having dinner, instead of always being on edge about what Jason might say or do. One of Whitney's friends mentioned a hiking group that met on weekends and asked if I'd want to join sometime, and I realized how isolated I'd become in Jason's world, where everything revolved around his friends and his schedule. I started picking up extra shifts at the hospital, partly because I needed the distraction from thinking about everything, and partly because my savings account was basically empty after covering Jason's expenses for months. He'd always been short on rent, or needed money for something, and I just paid it without really keeping track because that's what you do in a relationship. My supervisor noticed I was taking every available shift and pulled me aside during a break to ask if everything was okay at home. I told her I'd recently ended a relationship and was keeping busy, and she nodded like she understood. Then she mentioned that the hospital was starting a leadership training program for nurses interested in charge positions, and that she thought I'd be a good fit if I wanted to apply. The program came with a small raise and better scheduling options, and I told her I'd think about it even though I was already mentally filling out the application. Tom texted me a few days later saying he was having a small game night at his place and wanted me to know I was invited, and that Jason definitely wouldn't be there. He said he valued our friendship independent of Jason, and didn't want me to feel like I had to disappear from the friend group just because of what happened. I appreciated that he was being direct about it instead of doing that awkward thing where people avoid mentioning the situation entirely. I showed up to Tom's game night feeling nervous about who else would be there, but it ended up being just Tom, Alyssa, and 2 other people I knew from previous gatherings. But we played this card game that required actually paying attention, and I found myself laughing at someone's terrible strategy and forgetting to feel anxious about the whole situation. Alyssa pulled me aside later while we were getting drinks from the kitchen and mentioned that Jason had apparently been upset about not being invited tonight. She said he'd texted Tom asking what was going on, and seemed genuinely surprised that Tom was still hanging out with me. Jason had assumed everyone would automatically take his side, or at least stay neutral by avoiding both of us, but that wasn't happening. Alyssa said she'd been meaning to tell me that several people from the barbecue had reached out to her afterward, saying how uncomfortable Jason's behavior made them. The way he'd compared how Brittany and I looked in the same dress and showed those bedroom photos to everyone had crossed a line that even his friends noticed. During the game, someone mentioned the barbecue incident casually, and another person said they'd thought the whole thing was really disrespectful to announce in front of everyone like that. I learned that Kellen was apparently the only one still fully defending Jason, and even he was getting tired of listening to Jason complain about how I'd overreacted and ruined everything. Tom said Jason had been texting him constantly trying to get validation that he hadn't done anything wrong and that Brittany was just his friend. But Tom had finally told him that parading around your girlfriend's best friend as your backup option in front of 30 people were a jerk move, regardless of intent. I felt this weight lift knowing I wasn't crazy for being hurt by what happened and that other people had seen how wrong it was even if they hadn't said anything at the time. I filled out the application for the leadership training program at work and submitted it along with a recommendation from my supervisor. 2 weeks later, I got an email saying I'd been accepted into the program starting next month. The acceptance letter outlined the small raise that came with it and mentioned that charge nurses typically got better scheduling flexibility and more input on their shifts. Whitney found me in the break room after I got the news and gave me a hug saying she knew I'd get in. She pointed out that I was already doing better without Jason dragging me down with his constant needs and complaints. I hadn't really thought about it that way, but she was right that I had more energy for my actual job now that I wasn't spending my off time managing Jason's feelings about my work schedule. Cyrus called me one evening and mentioned he'd run into Jason at the gym where they both had memberships. Jason had apparently tried to act friendly and ask how I was doing like they were just casual acquaintances catching up. Cyrus told him to move on and leave me alone, which Jason hadn't taken well according to my brother. Jason had gotten defensive and said he was just being nice, and that I was the one making everything difficult by turning people against him. Cyrus said he'd told Jason that nobody needed to turn anyone against him because his own actions at that barbecue had done the job just fine. I thanked my brother for having my back, even though part of me wished Jason would just fade away entirely instead of trying to maintain these weird connections. I signed up for therapy through the hospital's employee assistance program, which gave staff members a certain number of free sessions per year. The therapist I met with was this older woman who asked me to walk her through the relationship and the breakup without interrupting or offering advice right away. After I finished talking, she pointed out patterns where I'd accommodated Jason's needs while he never considered mine. She asked me when Jason had last worked overtime to afford something for me or changed his schedule to support my career, and I realized the answer was never. He'd expected me to organize my entire life around his availability, while treating my nursing job like an annoying hobby that got in the way of his fun. The therapist said recognizing these patterns now would help me avoid similar dynamics in future relationships, and that the work we'd do together would focus on rebuilding my sense of what I deserved from a partner. About 6 weeks after the barbecue, Alyssa texted me a heads up that Jason and Brittany had just made their relationship Instagram official. She wanted me to hear it from her before I stumbled across it myself, which I appreciated, even though seeing it still felt like a punch to the stomach. They'd posted this photo of themselves at some outdoor festival, looking happy and couple-like, with a caption about finding your person when you least expect it. The comments were full of people saying they made a cute couple and asking how long they'd been together. I stared at the photo for a minute, taking in how quickly they'd moved from secret hangouts to public relationship, and then I closed the app. It stung knowing they were together, but mostly I felt relieved that I wasn't the one dating Jason anymore, and dealing with his selfishness while he probably did the same thing to Brittany that he'd done to me. I closed the Instagram app and set my phone face down on my coffee table. The photo of them at that festival kept trying to replay in my mind, but I forced myself to focus on the TV show I'd been watching before Alyssa's text. Whitney had invited me to meet some of her friends that weekend at a pottery class, and I'd said yes without thinking twice about whether Jason might be doing something with Brittany at the same time. That felt like progress, even though my chest still felt tight looking at their happy couple photo. By the next morning, the tightness had shifted into something different, something lighter. I woke up and realized I hadn't dreamed about the barbecue for the first time in weeks. My apartment was quiet and clean and entirely mine. No Jason's dirty dishes in the sink. No texts asking what I was making for dinner. No guilt about working late shifts. I made coffee and sat by my window watching people walk their dogs, and realized the relief was stronger than any hurt. Whitney texted asking if I wanted to grab breakfast before our shift, and I met her at the diner near the hospital. She ordered pancakes and I got an omelet, and we talked about her upcoming vacation plans and a funny patient interaction from last week. There was no comparison happening, no subtle competition about who looked better or who had the more interesting life. She asked how I was doing with everything, and I told her honestly that I felt free. Free from Jason's constant criticism about my work schedule. Free from Brittany's undermining comments disguised as concern. Free from trying to make myself smaller so they could feel bigger. Whitney smiled and said she could tell I seemed different lately, more relaxed. She invited me to her book club that met every other Thursday, and said the women were funny and smart and would love me. I said yes, even though I hadn't been to a book club since college. That weekend I went to the pottery class with Whitney and 3 of her friends, and spent 2 hours making a completely lopsided bowl, while laughing at how bad I was at centering clay on the wheel. Nobody knew about Jason or Brittany or the barbecue. I was just someone new making terrible pottery and having fun. One of Whitney's friends mentioned they did trivia nights at a bar downtown and invited me to join their team. I added it to my calendar and realized I was building a social life that had nothing to do with Jason's friend group or Brittany's drama. On Monday, my leadership training program started with an orientation session where they explained the curriculum and expectations. 12 nurses from different departments sat around a conference table and introduced themselves. I was nervous at first, thinking maybe I wasn't qualified enough or experienced enough, but the program director emphasized that they'd selected people who showed natural leadership qualities in their daily work. The first module focused on mentoring newer nurses and handling complex patient situations. We did role-playing exercises where I had to guide a hypothetical new hire through a difficult family interaction. My supervisor, who was observing the session, pulled me aside during the break and said I had a natural ability to explain things clearly while staying calm under pressure. She said that was exactly the kind of skill they needed in charge nurses. Over the next few weeks, I discovered I actually enjoyed teaching newer staff members. There was a nursing student on my floor who was struggling with time management, and I spent extra time showing her how I organized my patient rounds. She told me later that my advice had helped her feel less overwhelmed. Another nurse who was new to night shifts asked me how I stayed alert during the 3 a.m. slump, and I shared all my tricks. Helping them succeed made me feel competent and valued in ways Jason's dismissive comments about my job never had. He'd always acted like nursing was just following orders, but the leadership training showed me how much skill and judgment went into patient care decisions. Tom called me one evening and asked if he could stop by for a few minutes. He showed up with coffee, and we sat in my living room while he apologized for not speaking up sooner about Jason and Brittany's behavior. He said he felt guilty for hosting the barbecue where everything came out so publicly. I told him it wasn't his fault, and honestly, I was glad it happened at the barbecue because otherwise I might have wasted more time not knowing. Tom shifted uncomfortably and said he needed to tell me something. He'd been hanging out with Jason recently, and their relationship was already having problems. Apparently, they fought constantly because they were both used to being catered to, and neither wanted to compromise. Jason wanted Brittany to cook for him like I used to, and Brittany wanted Jason to be more spontaneous and adventurous. Tom said he felt bad for thinking they'd be good together based on their surface compatibility. He realized now that having things in common didn't mean they'd actually work as partners. I thanked him for telling me, but said I wasn't surprised. Two selfish people dating each other usually ended up with both of them disappointed. The next week, I was at the grocery store picking up ingredients for meal prep when I turned down the cereal aisle and saw Jason and Brittany standing by the granola section. My stomach dropped for a second, but I kept pushing my cart forward. Brittany noticed me first, and her whole body tensed. She grabbed Jason's arm and said something I couldn't hear. Jason turned and made eye contact with me. I nodded politely and kept walking toward the checkout. Jason took a step forward like he wanted to stop and talk, but Brittany pulled him back toward their cart. I heard her voice getting higher and annoyed as I walked away. The whole interaction lasted maybe 10 seconds, and I felt fine. No racing heart, no shaking hands, just a brief awkward moment that passed. I loaded my groceries into my car and drove home thinking about what I needed to accomplish that week. Alyssa met me for lunch a few days later and mentioned that Brittany had been complaining to mutual friends about Jason. Apparently, he played video games constantly and never wanted to go out or do anything interesting. Brittany had thought dating Jason would be fun and easy, but the reality was he expected her to handle everything while he sat on the couch. Alyssa said it was ironic since that was supposedly what made them so compatible, the fact that Brittany didn't nag him about video games. Turns out not nagging someone about their behavior and actually living with that behavior were two very different things. I finished my leadership training program 2 months after it started, and my supervisor called me into her office. She offered me a promotion to charge nurse position with better pay and more regular hours. She said I'd shown remarkable growth and resilience over the past couple months. My performance reviews had always been good, but something had shifted recently, and she could see I was more confident in my clinical decisions. I accepted the promotion and felt genuinely proud of myself. This was something I'd earned through my own work, not something I'd achieved while managing Jason's needs or dealing with Brittany's competition. Whitney organized a happy hour to celebrate and invited several nurses from our floor. We went to a wine bar downtown, and they all congratulated me and asked questions about the charge nurse role. Whitney pulled me aside at one point and said her cousin was visiting from out of state next weekend and asked if I'd be interested in meeting him for coffee. She emphasized it was super casual and no pressure. Just thought we might get along. I agreed, even though the idea of dating felt strange. We met at a coffee shop on Saturday afternoon, and her cousin turned out to be a high school teacher who liked hiking and cooking. The conversation was easy and pleasant, but I didn't feel any romantic spark. He seemed like a genuinely nice person, and we talked for over an hour about our jobs and families. When we said goodbye, he mentioned he'd be in town again in a few months and maybe we could hang out again. I told him that would be nice. The whole experience felt good even without a romantic connection. I'd had a nice conversation with someone new and proven to myself that I could do this when I was ready. I wasn't ready yet, but I was open to possibilities. Cyrus and Pearl took me out to dinner that weekend to celebrate my promotion. We went to my favorite Italian restaurant and they ordered champagne even though I protested that it wasn't that big of a deal. Pearl raised her glass and said she was proud of how I'd handled everything over the past few months. She could see I was genuinely happier now, not just pretending to be okay. Cyrus agreed and said I seemed more like myself than I had in the entire time I'd been dating Jason. He admitted he'd never liked Jason but hadn't wanted to interfere in my relationship. Now he was glad he didn't have to watch me shrink myself anymore to accommodate someone who didn't appreciate me. We spent the rest of dinner talking about their upcoming anniversary trip and my mom's plans to redecorate her kitchen. I realized how much stronger my family relationships had become since I wasn't constantly stressed about Jason's needs or defending his behavior. I'd been so focused on managing his feelings that I'd pulled away from people who actually cared about me. With my promotion raise and the savings I'd rebuilt, I started looking at apartments closer to the hospital. My current place was fine, but it was where I'd lived during my relationship with Jason, and I wanted something completely fresh. I found a one-bedroom in a newer building just 15 minutes from work. The rent was slightly higher, but my new salary covered it easily. The apartment had big windows and updated appliances, and most importantly, zero memories of Jason. I signed the lease and spent the following weekend moving with help from Cyrus and Whitney. Pearl brought over a housewarming gift, a set of nice kitchen knives she said every good cook needed. I decorated the space exactly how I wanted with plants and artwork and furniture arrangements that made sense to me. Nobody questioned my choices or suggested I was overthinking the layout. The apartment was entirely mine, and walking into it each day felt like breathing easier. Alyssa started texting me more after my move, just little check-ins about how the unpacking was going or asking if I wanted to grab coffee. At first I thought she was being polite because of the whole Tom connection, but after our third coffee date I realized she actually wanted to be friends. We met at a place near my new apartment and she brought me a succulent plant as a housewarming gift. She looked uncomfortable when we sat down with our drinks. She said she needed to tell me something that had been bothering her for months. She'd noticed Jason and Brittany acting weird together way back in April, maybe even March. The way they'd sit too close at group hangouts or how Brittany would touch his arm constantly. She'd seen them leave Tom's place together a few times when I was working, and it never sat right with her. She felt terrible for not saying anything sooner, but she didn't want to cause problems if she was reading too much into it. She kept second-guessing herself because Jason was my boyfriend and Brittany was my best friend, so surely they wouldn't actually be doing anything wrong. By the time the barbecue happened and Jason said that stuff out loud, she realized she should have trusted her gut and told me months earlier. I set down my coffee and told her she didn't need to feel guilty about any of it. Managing my relationship wasn't her job, and I was grateful she'd been supportive since everything came out. We talked for almost 2 hours about how women get put in these impossible positions around other people's relationship problems. If you say something, you're accused of stirring up drama or being jealous. If you don't say anything and it turns out to be true, you feel guilty for not warning your friend. Alyssa said she'd been in a similar situation years ago, where she knew her roommate's boyfriend was cheating but didn't say anything because she wasn't completely sure. When it all came out, her roommate was mad at her for not speaking up. There's no winning in those situations. I told her I didn't blame anyone except Jason and Brittany for their choices. Other people noticing weird behavior didn't make them responsible for what Jason and Brittany chose to do behind my back. Alyssa looked relieved when I said that. We made plans to meet up again the following week, and it felt good to have a friendship that existed outside of the whole Jason drama. Whitney mentioned at work that she'd run into Tom at the grocery store, and he'd told her some news about Jason. Apparently, Jason got fired from his job about 2 weeks ago for attendance issues. He'd been showing up late constantly and calling in sick too often. Whitney heard through Tom that Brittany was pretty upset about it because now she was covering most of their expenses, while Jason spent his days playing video games. The apartment hunting near her place that seemed so exciting wasn't quite as fun now that she was the one working while he sat around. Tom said Brittany had complained to him that Jason was supposed to be looking for new jobs, but instead he was gaming until 3 in the morning and sleeping until noon. She'd thought dating Jason would be easy and fun compared to how I supposedly made everything difficult. Turns out actually being in a relationship with him came with all the same problems I'd dealt with, except now she couldn't complain to me about it. I felt absolutely nothing hearing about Jason losing his job, except maybe a small bit of satisfaction that Brittany was experiencing what I went through. She got to find out firsthand what it was like to be the responsible one while Jason coasted along doing whatever he wanted. But mostly I was focused on my own life and how much better everything had become. I had a job I loved with a recent promotion and raise. I had a new apartment that felt like mine with no bad memories attached to it. I had real friends like Whitney and Alyssa who actually supported me instead of competing with me or putting me down. Jason's employment status didn't affect me anymore, and that realization felt powerful. 3 months ago, I would have been worried about him or felt guilty for not helping somehow. Now I just didn't care what he did with his life as long as it didn't involve me. Whitney suggested we plan a weekend trip to the beach with some of her friends from her book club. She said they were all really cool and I'd like them. We picked a weekend in late September and booked a beach house that could fit 6 people. As we planned what to bring and looked at the restaurant options near the beach, I realized I was actually excited about social plans instead of anxious. For the entire time I dated Jason, social events felt stressful because I never knew if he'd show up on time, or if he'd spend the whole time on his phone, or if he'd say something that would embarrass me in front of other people. I'd spent so much energy managing his moods and trying to make sure he had a good time that I never actually enjoyed myself. Now I was building a life based on what I enjoyed, rather than accommodating someone else's needs. The beach trip was about spending time with people who made me feel good, instead of people who made me feel small. Whitney's friends didn't know anything about my Jason drama, and I liked that I could just be myself around them without any history hanging over everything. A code blue got called during my shift on a Tuesday night, and I responded along with 2 doctors and another nurse. The patient had crashed suddenly, and we had maybe minutes to stabilize him. I'd handled plenty of emergencies before, but this one was particularly complicated because the patient had multiple conditions that made standard protocols risky. I suggested an alternative approach I'd learned in my leadership training, and one of the doctors agreed it was worth trying. We worked together for almost 40 minutes, and managed to stabilize the patient enough to get him to intensive care. Afterward, the doctor pulled me aside and said my quick thinking probably saved that patient's life. She was going to mention my performance to the hospital administration. The next day, my supervisor called me into her office and said she'd received multiple reports about how well I'd handled the crisis. My confidence in my professional abilities had grown so much over the past few months, without Jason's constant dismissive comments about my job. He used to act like being a nurse was just following orders and not a real career. Now I was recognized for my skills and decision-making by actual doctors. I'd always been good at my job, but I'd let Jason make me doubt myself. Without his voice in my head telling me I was overreacting or overthinking everything, I could trust my own judgment again. I stopped at a coffee shop near the hospital before my shift one evening and ran into Kellen waiting in line. He looked uncomfortable when he saw me and I almost left, but he called my name. He said he wanted to apologize for what he'd said at the barbecue about me overreacting. He told me he didn't know the full situation back then, and he felt like a jerk for defending Jason. He'd been hanging out with Jason and Brittany a few times since they got together, and he said they fight constantly. Jason complains that Brittany is too demanding and always wants to do stuff instead of just relaxing. Kellen said it was ironic because Jason used to complain I was too demanding for wanting to know his plans or expecting him to contribute to rent on time. Apparently, Jason complains about whoever he's dating regardless of what they actually do. Kellen said he'd started to realize Jason just doesn't want to put effort into relationships and blames other people when they expect basic consideration. He asked how I was doing and seemed genuinely interested in the answer. I told him I was doing really well, actually. Better than I'd been in a long time. He said he was glad and that he hoped we could still be friendly when we ran into each other. I appreciated the apology even though I didn't need it to move on. Tom texted me about 3 months after the barbecue to invite me to his birthday party. He said it would be at his place with about 20 people, and he wanted me to know I was welcome. He mentioned Jason and Brittany would probably show up, but he didn't want that to stop me from coming if I wanted to. I thought about it for maybe 5 minutes before texting back that I'd be there. I realized I had zero anxiety about potentially seeing Jason. I wasn't worried about what he'd think or what he'd say or whether it would be awkward. I just didn't care enough about his opinion to let it affect my choices anymore. The party was on a Saturday night and I showed up right on time with a bottle of wine for Tom. Alyssa was already there, and she gave me a hug and introduced me to a few people I didn't know. Whitney came a bit later with her boyfriend and we hung out by the snack table catching up. About an hour into the party, Jason and Brittany showed up together. Jason saw me across the room and his face did this weird thing like he wasn't sure if he should come over or not. Brittany grabbed his arm and pulled him toward the kitchen away from where I was standing. I watched them for maybe 2 seconds before turning back to my conversation with Whitney about the beach trip. They stayed for less than an hour before leaving early after what looked like an argument near the door. Brittany had her arms crossed and Jason kept gesturing with his hands like he was trying to explain something. They left without saying goodbye to most people, including Tom, whose birthday it was. I stayed until almost midnight having a great time with friends who actually wanted to be there. I realized sometime during that week after Tom's party that I'd stopped checking social media for updates about Jason and Brittany. I used to look at their profiles more than I wanted to admit, torturing myself with photos of them together or reading into their posts. But I genuinely couldn't remember the last time I'd looked. I didn't care what they were doing anymore. My life was full of work I loved where I was respected and valued. I had real friendships with people like Whitney and Alyssa who supported me without any weird competition or judgment. I had plans for my future that didn't involve anyone who didn't respect me. I was saving money for a trip to Europe next summer. I was taking a painting class on Thursday evenings just because it sounded fun. I was reading books I actually wanted to read instead of whatever Jason thought I should read. I was cooking meals I liked instead of constantly accommodating his preferences. Every part of my life felt like mine again in a way it hadn't for the entire 2 years I dated Jason. The difference was so obvious now that I wondered how I'd lived that way for so long. But I'd learned what I wouldn't accept anymore, and that knowledge felt more valuable than anything else I'd gained. Alyssa and I were leaving Tom's party together since we'd both parked on the same street. She mentioned how different I seemed from 3 months ago at the barbecue. She said I looked more confident and relaxed, like I wasn't carrying around stress all the time. I told her I felt like myself again, maybe even better than before. I'd learned what I wouldn't accept anymore in relationships and friendships. I knew what real support looked like versus people who just kept me around to feel better about themselves. I understood that being alone was better than being with someone who made me feel small. Those lessons were worth everything I went through with Jason and Brittany. The humiliation at the barbecue had been awful in the moment, but it forced me to see what I'd been ignoring for months. Sometimes you need everything to fall apart publicly before you can rebuild privately. Alyssa hugged me before we got to our cars and said she was proud of how I'd handled everything. I drove home to my apartment with the windows down and music playing, feeling completely at peace with where my life was heading.